Hey everyone, it's Kayvon with Scary Art. I know I haven't seen you in 2 months. I'm so sorry I haven't posted any videos lately. Been remodeling the house and working on a side project that's alcohol ink related. So I'm really excited to share that with you when I'm ready. We'll be ready hopefully next week. Other than that, let's get started. We're gonna work on a 12 by 18 piece of Yupo paper just to get started and have that urge to start creating again with alcohol inks. I'm going to have the practice mindset that I keep talking about. And so, because that's how you're going to be motivated to do more, and you're not going to be frustrated if you mess up. Practice mindset, practice mindset, practice mindset. So, I can't wait. Let's get started. Let's do it. The colors that I'm using today are going to be Bottle by Tim Holtz. Moss by Tim Holtz, Pinata Brass, and it's the closest to gold. And I'm going to use Copic. This is called a blue green, BG09, and that's about it. And I'm using 99% isopropyl alcohol, and I've got it in these little containers. And I'm also going to use a brush. All right, so I'm going to test these new brushes. It's a number 4. Looks fairly thin. Might be good for my detail work. So from a beginner's perspective, so how do you start? I've got a 18 by 12 sheet of Yupo paper, and I want to just, as I'm looking through this, I want to look at it from a compositional perspective to figure out where I want to start. And as a beginner, that's always the most difficult part. So what we're going to do, again, this is just practice. You got to put your mind at ease and consider this practice. Don't consider it a final masterpiece for your living room or whatnot. You got to look at this as practice, and if it comes out okay, then you're good. If it doesn't come out okay, you can always start over. So let's start. So from a compositional perspective, we're going to start from this corner, and I'm going to feed out, and that's it. I'm just going to start from this corner and just kind of feed out and see what comes out. And the other tools that I'm using, actually, by the way, I'm using a Giotto Rocket. This is a lens cleaner that you can use to push the air out. And I'm using a little Baby Bliss Pro. It's a very small hair dryer. So we're going to try it out and see how that does. I've never used it before. So all right, let's get started. Okay, I'm going to put my gloves on because I want to be safe. And I'm going to probably open the window because I wanted to talk through this as I'm working. And if I wear a mask, and the amount of alcohol that I'm using is not a lot, so I'm just going to try to talk through it as I do this. I just don't want the alcohol ink on my skin. There we go. All right. Let me prop a window. All right, let's get started. So I've poured the alcohol in these little bottles that have a fine point needle. This just helps me control more. So as I start, I'm going to start from this corner here, and I'm going to push out. So we're going to pour alcohol first on the Yupo. I don't want to put the alcohol ink down first, because what happens is you start staining the paper early. And the primary color that I'm going to use is this blue-green. So let's start with the blue-green. And we're going to just put a couple of drops of this beautiful blue-green. And we'll just put it like that, as so. And I'm going to use this first, the Giotto lens cleaner, and kind of move it around to my liking. So, I said I was going to start from the corner, and I'm still going to. So I'm going to push this ink to the corner, but also push it out to the center. So I'm just kind of moving it around. Again, practice. This is practice. This is not a masterpiece. That's the mindset you need to set for yourself. And let's say, I like this shape. I'm going to let that one sit for a little bit. And if I want, I can dry it out pretty quickly by setting this on low and just kind of helping it dry. But I do like where it is, where it sits. So you notice I'm kind of drying it from the outside. I'm not holding the blow dryer right on top because I don't want it to move too much. I don't want the ink to move too much. I like where it is. And certain areas that I don't like, I can always kind of do that and move it if I need to. So let's try to get it back to where it was. Something like that. And as that's drying, we're going to add a little bit of moss here. So we're going to do a couple drops of moss. There we go. And this is like an olive color. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use this ink. I'm going to push this moss that way. So we're going to push it out. And I'm going to use the Giotto here. And I'm just going to ease it in. Now there may be a little bit of moisture in the air, and that's where you're going to see some of these rough edges here. But don't worry about it. And moss tends to have less pigment in it. I accidentally got some of the moss in here, but that's okay. Play a little bit more. We're going to drop a couple more drops, probably 3 drops there. And I'm going to add a little bit of the alcohol, a little bit more alcohol to help it spread so it doesn't stain. And you see I'm just feeding it back in, leaving some of those lines, those beautiful, gorgeous lines. And again, mindset, practice, that's all you have to think about as you do this. I'm not worried about these edges yet because I'll figure something out when we get to it. I must have accidentally got some red in there, but that's okay. So I'm just using this air, these little pockets, and blending this in nicely here so that there's a soft, and I can push it through like so and push it from above, push the olive down from below and the blue from above. Interesting things happening here. And okay. So now we're gonna add bottle. So the bottle green by Tim Holtz, it's a really pretty rich green. So I'm gonna add some alcohol here. And I'm gonna bring this green in from this side. So it's a really rich green. And I'm just gonna use this little Giotto lens cleaner to move it around and blend it in. Mindset is everything when you're painting, especially with alcohol inks or any ink, honestly, or any kind of medium, because you're going to get frustrated if you don't have this mindset. And as you continue to paint, you know, you're going to have blocks, you're going to have roadblocks, you're going to have hurdles because you're trying different things, new things. And I suffer from this all the time. I expect to know something. I'm expected to know something, and I try it, and it doesn't work the way I like it, and then I just get frustrated. And because I forgot to keep it from that mindset perspective, keep the mindset clear and practice oriented. So now I'm going to use some of this gold. This gold is, or it's called brass. I'm sorry. And we're going to just use a couple drops here if I can get a few. Okay, so we're just going to drop a couple drops. That didn't work. No worries. There we go. And I'm doing this while it's wet. So you notice I haven't, you know, I'm putting the gold down as it's wet because it's going to give me some breaks. I need to put some more. That's not working, so we're just going to drop a couple drops in here very carefully. Ooh, that's more than a couple drops, but it's okay. We're going to start moving it around, breaking it up. See how I'm pushing it out and about. I want the gold to be in the moss area because I think that mossy color with the gold is really pretty. And I'm pushing the gold to where it collects at an edge. I do this because the gold looks really nice as it, you know, collects to an edge. It just looks really pretty. Now let's use the blow dryer and start pushing this ink around. We're not done. We're not even close to being done. But this is going to dry it where I can see what I need to change. I'm going to push this out. In. Okay. So right now it just looks like a ink spot. Like there's a couple ink spots here. There isn't really any kind of direction. There isn't really any kind of like concentration of color. So this is where we're going to start playing with that. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to add some of that blue-green right over here. And I'm going to add the alcohol into it. And we're going to use this Giotto, and I'm going to start pushing. May have to add a little bit more. There we go. So we want a little bit of concentration of color. I just want it to have some sort of direction as I'm painting. Okay. And we're going to add a little bit more alcohol here. So now I'm trying to feed this ink, the ink that I did originally, in more. The issue that I've noticed with Yupo paper is that it does stain if the pigment is really strong in the ink, but it's okay. It's good practice because canvas will stain too. I just, that's just something I've learned. So Yupo will stain. Plastic poster board doesn't, but you can't use plastic. Plastic poster board is not archival. Now I may get some Nara paper to try that, just to kind of show examples and differences between the two, so look for that in my videos soon. So now what I'm doing is I'm kind of bringing in, I don't like this little circle area, so I'm just kind of like wanting to create a new area, a new spot. Okay. You see how now it's like feeling like there's some sort of direction. Let's use the blow dryer again, and let's dry it out and move it a little bit more as a whole. So I'm just I'm not putting it directly on there, but I'm pushing the air out so that it makes these really fine lines. And you can do that with a blow dryer, so like now if I want to pull this in more, I can do that. Just draw a line of alcohol, and then use the blow dryer and just push it around. It's on hot. This blow dryer it's a travel size, so it doesn't allow me to change it to cool. But if I was to do this with a regular blow dryer, I recommend a regular blow dryer because you can actually set it to cool, and it allows you to play with the ink a little bit more. But if you have one of these travel ones, it's all right. So we're going to bring in the brush now and see how I'm kind of drawing my line where I want it. Alright. Let's bring this in. And I'm not directly holding the blow dryer on it. I'm kind of around it, but not quite directly on it. Pushing the ink out. I want some really soft edges here. There we go. Don't be afraid. Again, this is practice. You got to look at it that way. Don't be afraid to kind of push the bounds. See that? Like really pretty stuff happens. And then if I want to like put some drops here and push it out, I can do that as well. See, the cool thing about the Yupo paper though, it gives you really nice soft edges. Canvas doesn't do that. I mean, you can do it with canvas, it just takes more training to be able to do that with canvas. Okay, so, alright. So now let's play with the moss area. Alright, so the moss area, I want it to, let's see, so I've got some stuff happening here. I want a little bit of the moss in the concentration area here. So what we're gonna do is I'm going to put some alcohol here, just a little bit, and we're gonna drop some of that moss down. And we're gonna add a few drops, actually, 3 drops maybe. And let's push it around a little. The gold is kind of mixing with it, which is okay. It's kind of what you want. That's what I wanted at least. So we're gonna let this kind of dry right now. Okay. And as it's drying in the center, we're gonna push that out. So what it'll do, gloves are really important here. A mask is really important right now. I'm not using a mask because I want to talk to you on this, and I've got my window open, so that helps. So I like some of the brown that's happening in that corner, which is really pretty. And we're going to extend this out. We're going to push it out that way. I'm going to let the alcohol kind of sit, and I'm letting the alcohol sit so it gets rid of pushes that pigment around. And then you can use a brush. This is where the brush comes in. If I want to kind of connect some of those lines here, you can. And don't be afraid you can actually add more alcohol if you want to kind of help it move so it doesn't dry fast, because the blow dryer is on hot, so it will dry much faster. And we're going to push more of this out. There we go. Don't be afraid. See, I'm not afraid. It's bleeding into the rest, but I'm okay. As long as I'm keeping it away from this side, I'm okay, because we're going to further accentuate the other side. So again, I'm not directly on it. I'm just literally around it, pushing it, moving it around to the direction that I want. Now, if I do want to move it a little bit more harshly, then that's when I get on top of it. But right now, if you like certain things that are happening here, don't be afraid to just keep it and then come in with some more alcohol on the sides to kind of blend that in. So, do this. Alright, so now we've got some interesting things happening. So, got this weird like circular motion, which, you know, I'm trying to go linear and this circular thing happens, so it's okay. Because what we're going to do now is I'm going to push some ink from here all the way across. And we're going to use the blow dryer for this so I can give it a little bit more direction. And we're going to use the Giotto to kind of push it out. Again, little accidents are okay. You're going to have like some weird blue circles in here because of the drops, and that's all right. You know, it happens. I do like this little brown area, so we're going to see if we can keep that in there somehow. It's leaving some really pretty stuff. So, but I do not like this area. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to change that up by just adding a little bit more alcohol, letting it sit. You see how it comes right off. Luckily, that wasn't a lot of pigment, and it wasn't really completely dry. So we're going to start giving this a little bit more direction. And I'm just using this Giotto to do that. All right. So now we're going to use the bottle. The bottle green. It's just called bottle, and it's a dark green. I'm going to put the drops in first because I want those drops here. And then I'm going to use the alcohol to push it out that way because I don't want it to really mess with everything else. And we're going to do that. I want a little bit of a concentration of this bottle green color in this area. And I want it to kind of push out. So we're going to put a couple more drops. Don't be afraid to use the ink. Alright, so Now what we're going to do is I'm going to use the blow dryer to kind of concentrate, push it as a whole, and use the Giotto to kind of give me some spots to work with. See? So as I push, all right. So add a little bit more alcohol. Let's see here, kind of break that up, and I'm gonna blend it a little bit into the moss color, but I want a little bit of a concentration of it. So some pretty stuff's happening, as you can see. So you may say, well, you need to add more gold, and I may do that. For me, I'm just playing right now to figure out what will work and what doesn't. I can add the gold with the brush. So, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a cup. I've just got a plastic cup. I'm going to pour some of that alcohol in to the cup, and I'm going to use the brush to control some of the areas that I like. So we're just dipping the brush in there, and we're just going to move some of this ink around. Now what happens is when you put the ink down, when you put the brush down, you want it's gonna separate the ink where you place the brush. So it's not like you're putting a line there. It's actually splitting the ink away from where your brush is. So as you put the brush down, the ink goes away from it. So you have to think that, you have to acknowledge that as you're working through it, so that instead of putting the line where you want it, instead of putting the brush where you want the line, you put the brush ahead or behind the line to get the ink to collect there. What I mean by that. So let me show you what I mean. And this is kind of an interesting concept because it doesn't work like other watercolor or any of the other mediums. So if I want a line here, I have to draw the line right here ahead of it and push the alcohol towards the area that I want. See that? So we're going to do that again. So if I want the line here, I'm going to put the alcohol here and push it. And see how I'm kind of pushing the ink to the edge? And the moisture, because I opened up the window, the moisture is kind of giving me these ragged edges, which is okay. You can always clean that up with a brush. And now we're just adding a little bit of detail and some control in the areas that I like, and moving the areas that I don't like. So I don't like this little rounded area because it just looks like, exactly what it is. Ink, alcohol just poured there and let it dry, and you don't want that. You want it to look intentional. So we go in there, and art is about intent. Art is about your intent as an artist. So if your intent's to leave it there, great, but I kind of like moving it a little bit around so that there is a little bit more of a intention in the lines. So we're gonna move just spreading the ink right now to give it just a little bit more detail areas. So even here, so we're just gonna spread and come up from the top. If you don't like something, you can dry brush it to where it erases. Just adding some cross lines here, so do the same thing. I don't know if you can kind of see this, but I'll try to zoom in for you. Just connecting some of the lines. Kind of lifting the ink with the brush, smoothing it out. go. So as I'm looking through this, I'm like, I really like this area. I like some of the stuff that's happening. But I'm going to add a little bit of detail here. So I'm just going to come in with the brush and then just let the ink move. Again, these are just, you know, some of it is intentional, but some of it are little accidents, and that's okay. You want it to look like it's intentional. Sometimes the ink has its own properties and it'll do its own nature, and it does some really, really beautiful things. And it's okay to leave it and let it do its thing, because all right, so let's add some gold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some gold. There we go. See if I can. I'm going to add some. I had some gold in here, the brass, the pinata brass in this cup. So I'm just going to add some alcohol, do this, and see if it breaks loose some of the pigment so that I can reuse it, because that's the fortunate thing about. You can add blending solution too to loosen it up more. Just use the brush, kind of like it'll lift the ink, the gold off the cup back into, it activates it pretty much. All right, so let's put some gold right here. See how it's. All right, now before it spreads too far, so we're just gonna use the blow dryer. See, I'm pushing the gold. Things in here, that's good. And we're gonna add a little bit of the gold right here. So this is a much softer area of the gold. It's like almost glitter, the edges. Just dipping my brush into the gold right here and just pulling a little bit out. Same thing right here. I want to connect some of these lines as I'm doing it with the gold. So spread that out. Not really liking this area, so what we're gonna do, this bottom area right here, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna spread that out a little bit more. So again, see, like, don't be afraid because you're in practice mode. Just keep always that mindset, as I mentioned before. And we're gonna use the brush that has a little bit of gold and come in with the brush. Let's see what we can do here. It's really pretty. It's some cool things are happening here. We're gonna break that monotony of color and move it back in. We want to give it a little bit of direction. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush now, the air dryer, and just kind of dry it out. There we go. And now come in with the brush. Just going to lighten. This brush has gold on it still, which is okay, because I still want to connect the lines. I love using the brush because it gives me a little bit more control over the shapes that I want. Now there's some people that really have a lot of control with a blow dryer. I do admire that, and I do have control with the blow dryer, but there's certain things that I want to do that kind of relate to how I do alcohol ink that I can only do with a brush. And it's these fine little hairline cracks that I like to produce in my work. And all right, so let's continue bringing this line over in. Connect it right here. Okay, let me get a bigger brush. I can achieve a little bit more of that nature that So I'm going to use a flat brush. It's one of those cheap brushes. I want to create some more distinct lines. I've noticed that that smaller brush is good for detail, but I can't spread the ink fast enough before it dries. Just kind of playing with some of those lines in and out. So let's do the same thing here. So I like this line here that's going through, so we're going to do that. We're going to push this line all the way through and try to move this gold by brushing it off. We're going to bring this line takes more alcohol. See how I'm changing the direction as I brush through, lifting that gold. We want some really cool stuff. As I'm drawing this, I'm also thinking about the nature of what I'm trying to do, the direction and the nature of how I want this painting to look. Draw some of this line here out, in, back through. Some more ink, alcohol, sorry. Just kind of pushing. And if you don't like something, you can always just come in, just add a little bit of alcohol to it and just push it back out, and you can hopefully get some of that softness back in. Feed that back this way. Feed this back. So all of these colors typically have really pretty undertones. So as you're working, you may see other colors emerge out of it, like browns and yellows and magenta, and because all of these colors take other colors to make them, most of them, unless they're primary, but most of these colors are not primary because they're not. It's not like a pure magenta or pure cyan. There's always a mix of something to make it darker or lighter or change the hue. So yeah, so let's add a line here because I want to break this up. So we're just going to spread that out. See, I'm not worried about messing it up, and that's how you should be as you're doing this, because if you start messing it up, then you're gonna be afraid of taking risks, and when you take risks, you're gonna have something really pretty emerge from it. In most cases, and in some cases, if you don't, if it looks totally ruined in your opinion, that's fine. Just leave it alone. Come back to it later, because at that point you're probably too frustrated to mess with it, and you're gonna just keep making mistakes. So you just want to allow yourself some time to break it up and come back to it. So let's add like these little circles, but for this particular piece, I don't want those circles, so I'm gonna spread that out. This is a really cheap brush, and sometimes it'll give you some of the cheap stuff's sometimes better than the more expensive stuff. So, because you're not worried about ruining the bristles. So now what I'm doing is I'm just kind of trying to blend in the moss and leave some of the really nice areas of the moss the way they are, just adding some darker, harsher shades of color coming in. So we've got direction of this clashing with coming in through here, and then you got a huge clash in the middle that's happening, almost like a storm. And in order to accentuate that, I can keep going with adding more of these lines and softening other lines to kind of give me that feeling of clouds clashing, you know. So all right, so as I look through this, I'm like, you know, it's good. I can change some stuff about it. I can bring, like, as I'm looking through, I'm kind of stepping back and looking through it to see how I can improve it, and we're gonna bring this in. I haven't given this area a lot of attention. So we're gonna just kind of feed this color through. You know, I'm trying to manage controlling this gold so I don't, you know, hurt what we already had, because it was really pretty. But I didn't like the direction, so I want to add some finer lines here. You know, bringing in these like effects. Now all I'm doing now is I'm just dry brushing, and it's moving the ink. Dry brushing basically means the alcohol is dissipated enough. It's dissipated enough to where you can move it around, and the brush is almost dry. So we're gonna bring that. I like the stuff that's happening here. So now there's pushing the air, there's blowing the air at the brush, and there's blowing the air away from the brush. And that gives you different effects as you do this. So as you notice, I was doing this, but I was blowing the air into the brush, like past the brush. And then if you go with the brush like this, you can move it towards the line you want. So it gives you different effects. So, or you can go above it like this and kind of push and kind of guide the direction of the color that you want, the line that you want. And see, so there's different effects as you do it. See, like now I'm kind of just pushing the lines out and against to give me this like very floral, explosive nature. Let's do a little bit more here, and I think we'll be done. You just have to play with it to figure out what you want to do and how to achieve it with the simple movement of the ink. So I'm going to bring this line, and this line. So I'm just kind of bringing them together and then breaking and dispersing it. So add a little bit more alcohol here. And all right, I think we are done. So let me bring this up close so you can kind of see what I've got. It's kind of hard to see on your screen. Now, these edges here, I can always clean that up with alcohol, not a problem. But this is just practice again, like I mentioned. Let's take a look. So actually what I should do is move this whole plate up so you can kind of see the reflective nature of this. So you can kind of see how it's shining, and I'll put some better pictures up as you look through it. So the amount of detail here, like the little breaks and stuff that we have, that's the idea, to kind of just give it this little soft nature. Now if I was to go back, I could probably soften this area up a little bit more to kind of break this up and disperse it like I did on the bottom. That's it. That demo is done. I'm glad you liked it. I hope you liked it. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so. It really supports my channel. And again, in the description below, you'll have a link to the Amazon store. It's an affiliate link. Stay tuned. There's going to be some really cool things happening. Been working on a big project. Can't wait to share it with you. Thanks again, Ascari Art.